Light traveled a long way to reach the great chamber of the Halcyon Concord. It came from 1,000 suns, bent through crystal and fell soft and gold on the seats where the rulers of the galaxy sat. Every seat had a number. The number was not a name or a rank of birth. It was the size of your fleet. That was the only measure the Concord had ever trusted. A world with many warships sat high, near the roof, close to the light. A world with few sat low, in the shadow near the floor. Humanity's seat was on the floor. No one had ever cared about that seat before. It had stood empty for years while humans stayed behind the quiet wall the Concord had built around their small blue world. The Concord called it protection. Everyone knew it was a fence. You put a fence around a thing you do not understand yet, and you wait to see what it becomes. Today the seat was not empty. A woman sat in it, alone but for 2 aides, with no warship in the sky above her and no soldiers at her side. Her name was Ada Moore. She was not tall. She did not wear armor or bright cloth. She sat with her hands folded and she watched the great chamber the way a person watches, whether patient, expecting nothing and missing nothing. High above her, in the seat nearest the light, the high speaker of the Concord rose to his feet. His name was Orin, and he had ruled the shape of the galaxy for longer than most species in the room had been spacefaring. He was old in the way stone is old. He believed the order of things was fixed, the way stone believes it will always be a mountain. "The human world is called," Orin said. His voice filled the chamber without effort. "Rise and be seen." Ada Moore rose. She did not look nervous. That, more than anything, was the first small thing that went wrong, though no one felt it yet. Near the middle seats, a young attaché of the Ilu people leaned forward to get a better view. His name was Toru, and this was his first great meeting. He had been told the humans would be frightened. He had been told they would beg for a higher seat, or weep, or make loud promises. He had prepared himself to feel a little sorry for them. Instead, he found himself looking at a woman who seemed, oddly, to already know how the meeting would end. Orin spoke the terms the Concord had prepared. They were simple and they were meant to be. Humanity would open its research to the Concord. Humanity would place its ships, all of its few small ships, under Concord command. In return, humanity would keep its place at the bottom of the chamber and enjoy the safety of the wall around its world. It was, Orin said, a gift. The word he used meant mercy. A murmur of agreement moved through the high seats. This was the natural way of things. The strong offered the weak a place, and the weak took it and were grateful. It had happened 100 times. It would happen now. Ada Moore listened to all of it, without a change in her face. Down in one of the old seats, not the highest but far from the lowest, a counselor of the Vol people watched the human with narrow, careful eyes. Her name was Sail. The Vol were the oldest species still speaking in the chamber. They had seen 2 great orders rise and fall before this one, and they had a long memory for the feeling that came before a fall. Something in the human stillness pulled at that memory now. It was not the stillness of the weak. Sail had seen the weak. The weak trembled even when they hid it. This woman was not hiding anything. She simply had nothing to tremble about. Sail did not like that at all. Beside Ada, her aide moved. Her name was Grace Bennett, and her job was to carry numbers and see patterns other people missed. Quietly, without a word, Grace reached into the small case she carried and set a single data shard into the reading slot of the chamber archive. It was a normal act. Delegations shared documents all the time. No guard stopped her. No counselor looked. The shard sat there, dark and patient, waiting. Orin finished. He looked down at the small woman on the floor of his great chamber, and he allowed himself the smallest feeling of boredom. This was a formality. He had done 10,000 of these. "You have heard the terms of the Concord," he said. "Speak your answer, human, and let us close this matter. Do you accept the mercy of the galaxy?" The chamber waited for the word that always came. Yes, or a plea, or a slow, careful attempt to ask for a little more. Those were the only 3 answers the chamber had ever heard from a low seat. Ada Moore did not give any of them. She looked up, past the low seats, past the middle seats where young Toru held his breath, past the old seats where Sail sat very still, all the way up to the high seat where Oren stood in the gold light. And she took a slow breath, the kind a person takes not from fear but before lifting something heavy. The chamber, without knowing why, went quiet, truly quiet. The soft hum of 1,000 seats seemed to hold. And in that silence, the small woman with no warships in the sky above her rose fully to her feet, ready to speak. And every eye in the ruling body of the galaxy turned to watch a species they had already decided did not matter. They were about to be wrong about everything. There is a kind of quiet that is not peace. It is the quiet of a held breath, of a room that has just noticed something is wrong but cannot yet say what. That quiet filled the great chamber of the Halcyon Conquered now, and no one in the high seats understood it. They only felt it, the way you feel cold before you know a window is open. Ada Moore stood in that quiet and did not fill it right away. She let it grow. She had learned long ago and far from this place that silence made powerful people uneasy in a way words never could. Powerful people were used to being answered. When you did not answer, they had to sit with their own certainty, and certainty, left alone too long, begins to itch. High above, Speaker Oren felt the itch and did not name it. He mistook it for defiance, and defiance was a thing he knew how to crush. "You delay," Oren said. "There is no need, the terms are kind." Ada tilted her head just a little, as if she had heard something interesting rather than a command. "They are kind," she agreed. Her voice was plain and clear, and it carried further than a small voice should. Kindness is easy when you believe you are giving something the other side cannot take for itself. A ripple ran through the middle seats. It was not a word. It was the sound of many bodies shifting at once. In the human tongue, one might call it the sound of an insult landing. Young Toru of the Ilu felt his own breath catch. Envoys from low seats did not talk this way. They did not lean gently on the words of a high speaker as if testing whether the words would hold weight. He glanced around and saw that others had noticed too. Some looked amused, the way you smile at a small animal that snaps at a giant. But a few, the older ones, did not smile. Down among the old seats, Councillor Sale of the Vol leaned forward. Her long memory was awake now, fully awake, and it was showing her pictures she did not welcome. She remembered a species from the last fallen order, a people who had also spoken softly right before everything came apart. She had been young then. She had not understood the softness. She understood it now. Softness in a strong hand is not weakness. It is a choice, and a choice can be taken back. But was this hand strong? That was the question that made no sense. The humans had almost no fleet. Sale had read the numbers 100 times. A dozen ships, small and old, orbiting one walled world. By every measure the Conquered had ever used, humanity was nothing. And yet, while the chamber murmured, something moved in Ada Moore's thoughts that no one else could see. She was remembering her own world decades back in a plain gray room where humans had made a plain gray choice. She remembered the argument, long and hard. Some had wanted to shout at the stars, to build loud and grow fast and demand a place. Others, quieter ones, had said no, not because they were afraid. Because they had looked at the galaxy and seen what it truly was, and they had decided that the loudest thing a species could do was to say nothing at all, for as long as it took. So humanity had gone quiet. It had let the Conquered build its wall and feel proud of it. And behind that wall, humanity had done a thing no one imagined a young species could do. But Ada was not ready to say that yet. There was an order to these things. "Speak plainly," Oren said, and now there was an edge under the smoothness. "If you refuse the terms, say so, and we will speak of what happens to worlds that refuse." "I am not refusing," Ada said. "You have not offered me anything to refuse. You have offered me a place I already hold. You cannot give a person their own chair." Sale closed her eyes for one moment. There it was, the exact shape of the words she had feared. Beside Ada, Grace Bennett stood very still with her hands folded, her eyes on the dark data shard sitting in the chamber archive. She was counting in her mind the small steps left before it was time. Not yet. Almost. She had run this moment in her head 1,000 times on the long flight out. Every version ended the same way, with the chamber learning something it could not unlearn. Oren's patience thinned to a thread. You forget where you sit, human. You forget who protects your world. Remove that protection and see how long your quiet lasts. And here at last Ada Moore smiled. It was not a cruel smile. That was the worst of it. It was almost gentle, almost sad, the smile of someone who has to tell a proud old man a truth he will hate. Speaker Oren, she said, you have the order of it backward. The wall around my world was never yours to build. We let you build it. We watched you build it, and we let you feel safe behind it, because a fence keeps two things apart, and we did not mind which side you thought was the cage. The chamber did not murmur now. The chamber was silent again, that same held-breath silence but deeper. Toru realized his hands were gripping the edge of his seat. He did not remember doing it. Oren stared down at the small woman on the floor of his great chamber, and for the first time in a very long life, he could not find the next word. He had ruled by always having the next word. Now there was only the silence, and the woman standing calm inside it, and the sense, cold and creeping, that the meeting he had called was no longer his. Ada let the silence stretch one last time. Then she looked to Grace and gave the smallest nod. It was time. Every great power has a story it tells itself, and the Halcyon Conquered story was this. Strength is real, and strength can be counted, and whoever has the most of it stands closest to the light. For 300 years no one had questioned the story, because no one had ever seen it fail. A story that never fails stops feeling like a story. It starts to feel like the sky. In the next few minutes, the humans took the sky down. Grace Bennett touched the chamber archive. The dark data shard woke. Above every seat in the open air of the great chamber, the shared light of the conquered began to draw a picture. This was normal. Delegations showed maps, ships, records. The high seats settled back, expecting a plea dressed up as data, some small proof of human worth meant to earn a better chair. That is not what appeared. What appeared was the galaxy. Not a rough sketch, not the tired public star charts every school child knew. It was the true galaxy, drawn in fine and living light, world by world, fleet by fleet, gate by gate, and it was labeled. Every conquered world glowed with its real name, its real strength, its real weakness. The hidden supply routes the conquered never spoke of aloud. The old fortress worlds no outsider was meant to know existed. The quiet places where the Guardian fleet parked its ships between patrols. All of it. Laid open in the air above the council, like a body on a table. The chamber made a sound then. It was not a murmur. It was closer to a gasp pulled from 1,000 throats at once. Speaker Oren looked at the map of his own galaxy, more complete and more honest than any map his own people had ever made, and he almost laughed. Almost. Because surely it was a trick. Surely the humans had scraped this together, stolen fragments, guessed at the rest. This proves nothing, he said, but his voice had lost some of its height. Any spy can gather scraps. Look at the date, Ada Moore said quietly. In the corner of the great light map, small and plain, a date sat. It was the date the survey had been completed. And it was old. It was years before humanity's first official contact with the conquered. Years before the wall was built around the human world. Years before the conquered had even known there was a species on that small blue planet worth watching. The humans had mapped the entire galaxy, in secret, in full, before the galaxy ever knew they were there. Down among the old seats, Counselor Sale of the Vol stopped breathing for a moment. She understood first. She always understood first. That was both her gift and her curse. The date meant only one thing. To make a map like this, you had to reach every world. To reach every world unseen, you had to be able to go anywhere quietly, past every fleet, past every wall, and leave no trace. And if you could go anywhere quietly, then you could go anywhere for any reason. Including reasons that did not involve a map. The humans had been able to touch every world in the galaxy, and they had chosen only to look. Sail put a long hand over her mouth, not in fear of the humans, in fear of what the rest of the chamber was about to realize. Warden Den, commander of the Guardian fleet, was on his feet in the high seats, and he was not a man who scared easily. "A bluff," he said, loud and hard. "A clever picture. Ships and dates can be painted. Where is the proof of reach? Show me one world you touched and I will believe one word." Grace Bennett, without looking up, touched the archive again. The map changed. On 100 worlds at once, small marks lit up. Beside each mark, a record opened. Not weapons, not damage, small, harmless things. A sensor buoy quietly borrowed and returned. A sealed vault opened and closed with nothing taken. A Guardian ship passed within reach and left untouched, its own logs shown alongside to prove it had never once noticed. Proof, world by world, patient and undeniable, that humans had stood inside the Concord's most guarded places and simply walked back out. For every threat the Concord could have made, the humans had a quiet answer already sitting in the dark. "We were already here and we did nothing, and you never knew." Warden Den's mouth was open. No sound came out of it. He looked at the record for his own flagship, the pride of the Guardian fleet, and saw a human mark on it, dated 11 years ago with a single plain note beside it. Nothing taken, nothing changed, just present. The strong seats of the great chamber, the ones closest to the light, began to understand what the old Vol counselor had understood a full minute before them, and the understanding moved through them like a crack moving through ice. The ranking was a lie. Not a small lie. The whole thing. Every seat, every number, every proud measure of fleets. It had never described who was strongest. It had only ever described who was loudest, who had shown their strength, who had spent it where others could see. And humanity had never shown anything. Humanity had sat on the floor of the chamber in the lowest seat, holding a power so complete it did not need to be spent, watching the mighty rank themselves like children stacking stones. Toru of the Illu sat frozen in the middle seats, and a strange, cold thought went through him. If the ranking was a lie, then his own place in it was a lie. Everyone's place was a lie. The whole floor they all stood on had just turned to water. High above, Speaker Oren stared down at the small woman who had not raised her voice once. And for the first time in 300 years, the story the Conquered told itself simply stopped being true. A door is a small thing until the wrong person walks through it. Then a whole world can turn on the hinge. The great chamber of the Halcyon Conquered had many doors, but only one mattered now, the tall one behind the human seat, the one the small woman had come in through and would soon leave by. Everyone in the chamber, though few could have said it aloud, had begun to feel that the story of the galaxy would end whenever that door closed behind her. Ada Moore let the last of the records fade from the air. The living map of the galaxy, honest and terrible, folded back into the dark shard. And then she did the one thing no one in the chamber was ready for. She did not threaten them. The high seats were braced for a demand. That was how power spoke. They knew no other language. A species that could reach any world that had already touched every fortress would surely now name its price. New terms. A high seat, tribute, rule. The council waited to learn its new master, half in dread and half, strangely, in relief, because a master is at least a known thing. Instead, Ada Moore simply said, "That is all we came to show you. We will be leaving now." The words fell into the chamber and made no sense at first. "Leaving," Speaker Oren repeated. The word did not fit in his mouth. "You show us this and you leave. You make no claim, you take nothing." "There is nothing here we want," Ada said. It was not said with pride. It was said the way a person states the weather. "You may keep your seats. You may keep your ranking. You may keep your wall around our world if it comforts you. We only felt it was time you knew the truth of what those things are worth." And that, Toru of the Illu would think for the rest of his long life, was the moment the real horror entered the room. Not fear of what the humans would do, fear of what they would not do. If the humans had taken the throne, the galaxy would still have a shape. A cruel shape, but a shape. Someone at the top, everyone else below, the old game with new players. That, the council could have survived. But the humans were not taking the throne. They were showing everyone that the throne had always been empty, that the one being who could sit in it had looked at it and walked away, and now everyone would have to live knowing the chair meant nothing and never had. You cannot rule frightened people. Once they learned the fear was a choice. Warden Den understood this in his soldier's bones, and it drove him to his feet. "No," he said, "you do not simply walk out of here. Guardian Fleet hold the human ship, seal the gate. They do not leave this system until the conquered decides they may." For a moment the old command reflex held. Somewhere above the chamber in the cold dark, the great ships of the Guardian Fleet began to turn. And then they stopped. Not because the humans did anything, because the captains of those ships had just watched in the living map a human mark sitting on the hull of their own vessels dated years ago with the same quiet note beside each one. Nothing taken, nothing changed, just present. Every captain in the Guardian Fleet was now asking the same question at once, and it was a question that unmade orders. Hold the humans with what? If they wished to be gone, were they not already able to be gone? Had they ever truly been held at all, or only allowed to sit and be watched, the way you allow a lion to sleep in a cage whose door it could open any time it pleased? Warden Den gave the order twice more. The fleet did not move, and a commander whose fleet will not move is not a commander anymore. He sat down slowly, and something went out of his face that would not come back. Ada Moore gathered her two aides with a small gesture. Grace Bennett took the shard from the archive and slid it back into its plain case, and the great map of the galaxy was gone as if it had never been, though every mind in the chamber still held the picture of it, and would forever. They walked toward the tall door. Toru of the Ilu, without deciding to, rose from his seat. He did not know why. He only knew that if these people walked out and he never asked, he would wonder for the rest of his life. He caught up to Ada at the base of the high seats under the gold light, and the words came out of him in a rush. "Why," he said, "you could have taken all of it, any of it. You could have ruled everything. Why come all this way only to show us and then leave with nothing?" Ada Moore stopped and looked at the young Ilu, and for the first time her calm softened into something almost warm. "Because power you spend is gone," she said, "and power you keep is still yours. Your galaxy measured strength by how loudly a people used it. We measured it by how long a people could choose not to. That is the only difference between us. It was always the only difference." She paused. "We did not come to rule you. We came to show you that you were never ruled by strength at all, only by the belief that everyone would use it. We are the proof that no one has to." Then she turned, and she walked to the tall door, and her aides walked with her. Three small figures with no fleet in the sky above them, crossing the floor of a chamber that had ranked them last. The door opened, the door closed. And in the great chamber of the Halcyon conquered, for the first time in 300 years, a silence fell that no high speaker could fill, and no one from the highest seat to the lowest could think of a single reason the old order should go on standing now. People imagine that a great power falls the way a tower falls, all at once, with noise and dust and a clear moment you can point to and say, "There, that is when it ended." It almost never happens that way. A great power falls the way a winter thaws. Slowly, quietly from underneath, until one day you look for the ice and find only water, and you cannot say exactly when the change was done. The Halcyon conquered did not fall in a battle. There was no battle. The humans went home behind their wall and did nothing at all, which turned out to be the most powerful thing anyone could have done. The thaw began with small things, out at the edges, where the light of the chamber was thin. A minor world had for 200 years sent tribute to a stronger neighbor, grain and metal and skilled hands, because the stronger world had more ships and everyone knew what more ships meant. That season, the tribute did not come. No speech was made. No war was declared. The small world simply did not send it and waited to see what would happen. and the stronger neighbor, when its counselors met, found they could not answer a question that had never needed answering before. What did their ships mean now if a species could hold the whole galaxy in its hand and choose to keep the hand open? The stronger world sent no punishment. It was too busy asking the question. The tribute never came again. This happened once, then it happened in 10 places, then in 100. Nobody had ordered it. That was what frightened the conquered most. There was no rebellion to crush, no leader to remove, no fleet to break. There was only a slow, spreading understanding, passing from world to world like a change in the weather, that the fear which had held everything together was a thing you were allowed to simply stop feeling. Once a mind learns that, no one can teach it back. The great chamber, Speaker Orin tried to hold the sky in place with words. He was good with words. He had ruled with them for a lifetime. He rose in session after session and spoke of order, of tradition, of the dangers of a galaxy without a firm hand. His voice was as smooth and as high as ever. But the seats below him had learned something the day the humans left, and a lesson like that does not unlearn. His words, once heavy as stone, now passed through the chamber like wind through an open house. The counselors heard them. They simply no longer believed that the words could reach out and hurt them, and belief had been the only thing giving the words teeth. Counselor Sale of the Vol watched Orin speak, and one day, in the middle of one of his grand speeches, she stood up. The chamber went quiet, because the oldest species in the room did not often rise. "We should stop pretending," Sale said, and her old voice carried further than Orin's grand one. "The human did not break our order. She only showed us it was made of a story we all agreed to tell. The ranking measured nothing. The fear protected no one. We built a mountain out of the belief that everyone would use their strength, and one people quietly proved that belief false, and now the mountain is only air. I am too old to keep standing on air and calling it stone. I am going home." And Sale of the Vol walked out of the great chamber, the second person to do so, and unlike the first, she was never coming back. After that, the leaving did not stop, not all at once, but seat by seat, over seasons, the great chamber grew emptier. Species that had come for 300 years found they had nothing to come for. The whole purpose of the chamber had been to fix your place in the ranking, and no one believed in the ranking anymore. Warden Den's fleet was the last thing to go, and it went the hardest, because a fleet is loyal by training long after it has stopped being loyal by heart. His captains stayed at their posts, but they patrolled a galaxy that no longer looked to them, and slowly they began to ask what they were guarding, and from whom. There was no enemy fleet. There never had been one that mattered. The only species who could have destroyed them had shown, plainly, that it would not. So they guarded the idea of the conquered, and an idea is a cold thing to give your life for once you have seen through it. One by one, ships requested to stand down. Den signed each request. What else could he do? A warden without belief is only a man in a large chair, and Den was honest enough in the end to know it. Through all of this, humanity stayed silent. It sent no envoy to gloat, no fleet to conquer, no message to the falling conquered at all. Ada Moore's world simply went back to being quiet, the way it had been quiet before, a small blue place behind a wall that everyone now understood had never really been a wall. And that silence was the loudest thing in the galaxy. Every species in its own time came to feel it. The humans were not making a new order. They were leaving a space where an order used to be, and letting everyone decide, for the first time, what to put there. Toru of the Ilu could not stop thinking about the woman at the door and the things she had said about keeping power instead of spending it. He was young. His whole life had been built on the ranking, on climbing it, on fearing those above and looking down on those below. Now the ranking was gone, and he did not know who he was without it. But he knew one thing. He wanted to understand the people who had chosen restraint when they could have chosen everything. So Toru, too, left the great chamber. But he did not go home. He went looking for the humans. Years are patient things. They wear down mountains, and they wear down empires, and they wear down the sharp edges of stories until what is left is only what was ever true. Enough of them passed over the galaxy that children were born who had never heard the word conquered spoken as a living thing. To them it was history, a name in old records, a chamber that no longer met. They grew up in a galaxy their grandparents would not have recognized, and they thought it perfectly ordinary. The way each new life always thinks the world it is handed is simply how the world has always been. No empire had risen to take the conquered's place. This surprised everyone who studied it later because that was not how the story of power was supposed to go. When a great order falls, another is meant to climb over its bones, but no one climbed. The humans who could have did not want it, and every other species had watched the humans choose restraint and slowly, without ever quite deciding to, had begun to copy them, not out of kindness, out of understanding. They had all seen, in one long afternoon in a great chamber, the plain proof that a power built on fear was a power built on nothing, and no one wished to build on nothing again. So the galaxy became a stranger, warier, more honest place. Worlds still disagreed. Worlds still competed, traded hard, argued long. But they did it now as things that knew a secret, that the strongest hand in any room might well be the one that stayed open, and that you could never again be sure who in the room was truly strong, because the truly strong might be the one saying the least. That single uncertainty did more to keep the peace than the whole Guardian fleet ever had. It is hard to bully a table when you cannot be sure which of the quiet ones could unmake you. On a small blue world behind a wall that no longer meant anything, an old woman sat in a garden. Ada Moore had grown old the way trees grow old, slowly and without complaint. She had never spoken publicly of the day in the chamber. Others had told the story 1,000 times, added to it, argued over the words, until the true afternoon and the legend had grown apart. She let them. The legend did its work. The truth was hers to keep, and keeping things, after all, was the whole of what she believed in. A visitor came to her garden one gray morning. He was not young anymore either, though he was younger than she was, and he had spent a great part of his life traveling toward this exact meeting without ever being sure it would happen. It was Toru of the Ilu. His search had taken decades. Humanity did not make itself easy to find, and he had come to understand that this, too, was on purpose. He sat with her a long while before he asked the question he had carried, since he was a young attaché gripping the edge of his seat. "Did you plan it?" Toru said at last. "All of it, the fall. Did your people mean for the conquered to end that way?" Ada Moore was quiet for a moment, the same patient quiet he remembered from the chamber, the quiet that made powerful people uneasy and made honest ones lean in. "No," she said. "We did not plan a fall. We would not have known how. You cannot plan a thaw. You can only stop pretending it is still winter." She looked out over her garden. "We did not go to your chamber to break anything, Toru. We went because we were tired of the lie. Your galaxy had decided that strength was a thing you proved by using it, by ranking it, by frightening the weak with it. We simply could not agree. We had the strength to prove them wrong the loud way, the way they would have understood, with fleets and fire. And we chose, instead, to prove it the quiet way. We told the truth once plainly, and we let the truth do the rest. The conquered did not fall because we pushed it. It fell because it was only ever held up by everyone agreeing not to look. We made them look. That was all. That was everything." Toru sat with that for a long time. "You never conquered anyone," he said finally. "It was not quite a question." "No," Ada agreed. "We ended one meeting with one sentence. Everything after that the galaxy did to itself once it could see clearly. We did not change what strength was. We changed what everyone believed strength was. Those are not the same act, but only one of them lasts." She smiled at him then, old and tired and kind, and Toru understood that he had his answer, and that it was the same answer she had given him at the door of the chamber all those years ago, only now he was old enough to hear it. When Toru left the garden, he did not go back to any chamber, because there was no chamber to go back to. He carried the answer with him instead, out into the wary, honest, unranked galaxy, and he told it to whoever would listen, and slowly it became one more thread in the long story of how everything changed. And far away, in a place kept dark on purpose, the great chamber of the Halcyon Conquered still stood, empty now, its 1,000 seats silent, its ranking of fleets gone cold and unlit. No one ruled from it. No one wanted to. It sat as a monument to a story the galaxy had finally stopped telling itself, the story that whoever holds the most power must surely use it. Humanity had held the most power of all. And humanity had simply chosen, in front of everyone, not to. That choice, made once in a quiet voice, in a single sentence, had reached further than any fleet in the history of the stars, and the galaxy, changed forever by it, never once recovered the thing it lost that day, which was its old and comfortable belief that strength and cruelty were the same word. It was a loss the galaxy learned, in time, to be grateful for,